And it brings us all the way back to Matthew 25. Whatsoever you did for the least of these, my brothers and sisters, so you did to me. And it's like, do we see Jesus in the migrants at the border?
I just want to say welcome to Dr. Jemar Tisby, who you know him as a professor, a historian, author of a couple of books, including the New York Times bestseller, The Color of Compromise. His most recent book is called The Spirit of Justice. True stories of faith, race, and resistance. His production company, Tisby Studios, is now creating content, both learning content and what they call transformational content and films with the purpose of truth telling, repair, and justice. Dr. Tisby's documentary was released in April of 2026, and it takes us to the heart of a very sensitive issue, the issue of immigration, in particular, the issue of immigration as it is contrasted against the practice of American Christianity. Many American Christians are against some of the immigration and are for uh, the policies that are right now being practiced. And so we just welcome him today because we want to talk about his new film, Jesus Was a Migrant. Jesus was a migrant.
Every time we've screened the film, tears are shed because of how moving the stories of the migrants are. Whenever we ask for a word or a phrase in response to the film, people say things like enlightening, challenging, and the most surprising sentiment to me is they say they feel hopeful. And I say that's surprising because these stories are pretty sad of migrants who are stuck at the border.
Mm.
But I think where the hopefulness comes from is the fact that the stories are being heard and now we can do something.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Help is on the way,
Mm-hmm.
hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I only have a couple of questions. My big thing is, I read some of the press on it and everything, and people are discussing, the production behind the scenes. I'm really interested in you transporting us there from our senses point of view. You get there, you've arranged this, you show up. Tell us, what do you see? What do you hear? What do you smell? What do
Mm-hmm.
you feel? Just take us there.
So this was on a pilgrimage with an organization called FaithWorks, and we gathered in El Paso, Texas,
Mm.
and then we crossed the border into Mexico, into Ciudad Juarez. The first thing you feel is that borders are arbitrary. We're making this big deal and having these big discussions about boundaries that were created by human beings. The name of the city, El Paso, means to pass or to cross. So there was this exchange. The river was not a boundary, it was a landmark. And what we did was build walls and fences and barbed wire. So it just felt arbitrary. And then the feeling was heat, dust on the Mexico side. Um, it was loud. There was the din of tens of thousands of people in a small area. The emotions are what stood out even more than the sensory aspects. Um, there was this instant feeling of connection with the migrants. They've been labeled with so many labels.
Mhm.
pejorative ones: alien, illegals, criminal alien. But first and foremost, they're human beings. And that's what came through instantly when we were talking to the people in the shelter. They were just that. They were people. They weren't problems. They weren't issues. They weren't a policy to be debated. They were human beings made in God's image.
I worry when I see the pictures of the detention centers, the overcrowding, just the inhumanity of putting people and processing people. Like I heard somebody say, like, it's like an Amazon for people,
Mm.
just processing people like they were products. Did you have that sense of the oppressive nature of the detention center when you got there?
So we only were able to go into the migrant shelters, but we did talk to and we feature a family in the film that was in a detention center. That was the most emotionally painful story I heard on the trip because they had a young son. It was a husband and wife. They had two kids, uh, uh, two boys. One was a teenager, but their younger son, who was maybe 8 or 9 years old, had severe autism to the point where he was mostly nonverbal.
Mm.
And he also had an issue with textures. Um, so he could not eat solid food. It had to be blended up or in a liquid form. So in the detention center, he was not able to get food processed in that way. His parents begged the guards for any sort of accommodations, any sort of mercy, not for them, for their child. And they were met with absolute uh, um, stubbornness, no humanity, no compassion. And the boy, like I said, was mostly nonverbal, but he would go for days without food, and all he could say was, "Mom, sopita, mom,
Mm.
soup."
Mm.
He was just so hungry that he put together two words and just said, "Soup."
Mhm. Yeah, this thing breaks my heart. You named this film Jesus Was a Migrant because in my heart, I think you wanted to place Jesus in that detention center and hope. And everything that I've read about this, your objective is very clear. You want to highlight the tension, the controversy, the contradiction that is existing between the practice of Christian faith and current U.S. immigration policy. Am I right?
Exactly. When you look at the movie poster, you'll see it says 270,000 migrants were locked out in a day. Many of them were Christians, so were the people celebrating. So we wanted to highlight that tension. These are supposed to be brothers and sisters in Christ, and yet you have people who call themselves Christians in the United States absolutely celebrating their misery.
Mm.
And this is within the household of God. So there is that tension. And so the question is, how can you say you worship Jesus, who was himself a migrant, while demonstrating such callousness and such inhumanity to migrants today? And it brings us all the way back to Matthew 25. Whatsoever you did for the least of these, my brothers and sisters, so you did to me. And it's like, do we see Jesus in the migrants at the border? Do we believe this religion that we profess? Because if we did, it's not that we would have open borders. It's not that we wouldn't have any rules at all, but we'd certainly treat people more humanely. We treat people more mercifully. We treat people with more compassion. The other thing I get fired up about is folks have these caricatures of migrants, particularly at the southern border, where the current president began his campaign in 2015 by saying they're sending criminals and rapists over the Mexican border, right? And that image has stuck with too many people. The reality is, and you'll see this in the film, there's a woman who's single because her husband has been killed by the cartels. And she decided to leave. She stayed there even after that, but she decided to leave when they started threatening her teenage daughter. So she's fleeing violence.
Right.
And then the other family was coming over to the United States for better medical care for their son.
Hmm.
These are not harmful people. These
Hmm.
are human beings who, just like any of us would do, are trying to protect their families and make sure they have the best life possible. And yet, we're treating them like these enemies, um, and these criminals. And Christians ought to know better. We ought to at least do our homework
At least.
and make sure that we understand what's happening
I don't hear you giving anybody any passes on any of this. You
here.
know, I don't know. Is there something in here where you're seeing Christians who are saying, yeah, but.
That's an undercurrent. We're sort of responding to some of that with the entire film, but this is what I call a transformational faith film,
Okay.
which means our goal is not really to persuade the unwilling.
Hmm.
At this point, you've kind of made your decision about what you believe about migrants. And we hope that God changes your heart and allows you to have some compassion and see the humanity of folks like this. At the same time, we are not centering the people who the Bible calls hard hearted. We are not crafting a movie or a film experience to try to prick their conscience. This film centers the migrants. It centers the people who are being harmed. It centers the people who are being depressed. That is exactly what Jesus did in Luke chapter 4 when he announces his public ministry and says, I'm here for the poor. I'm here for the orphan. I'm here for the prisoner. I'm here for the oppressed.
Hmm.
That's what defined Jesus's ministry when he unrolls the scroll of Isaiah 61, right? So that's
Hmm.
what we want to do in this film is say, we are not going to put at the center the people who have already decided that migrants don't deserve to be here. We're putting at the center of the film the migrants themselves who are suffering and being harmed because of our policies
Hmm.
in our country.
Now, listen, I hear you about this, and I appreciate you. And I didn't. Well, I guess I did mention. I just went through what was it, 8 weeks of your course, Journey to Justice, and I gotta say, and I'm pushing back on this right now because after reading your books and hearing you, I gotta think that it is frustrating for you as it is, even though this is your superpower, but for the rest of us as well, to be satisfied. Because when I was in your course, I saw people who started out the course with tears rolling down their faces before we even got, you didn't say anything yet. And they were crying, and then we in our small groups we had people discuss. I go to church and I've been put out of the book, the church or the board has called me up on, I don't know what you do, it's not charges, but they got a good talking to, and they're crying and they're repenting because they're coming out of a way of thinking. So I gotta wonder how you can be satisfied with trying to go for the amorphous coalition of the willing instead of the people who are causing the injustice in Jesus' name.
Mm. Because the people who have moved us toward progress have always been a remnant.
Okay.
That's why Jesus describes the kingdom like a mustard seed. It's not big, but it can be. It can grow and have a large impact. So I'm never looking for massive numbers. I'm looking for the few who have understood God's assignment to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with God. Those are the people who this film is for, and those are the people who will actually take action.
I read somewhere, and you tell me if you think this is true or not. They characterize you as wait, let me look at make sure. What Jemar Tisby, once an evangelical insider, but after writing and publishing the books, The Color of Compromise, is now a very controversial figure. Is that your reality?
It is. I have become anathema in some spaces. I have become radioactive to some individuals and organizations. But you know what? We are called to be witnesses. That means people need to know what you stand for and what you will not stand for. And so while I have been cut off from certain communities, and that's not been easy because these are the communities that I learned the faith in since high school. While I've been cut off from some communities, you know what? God is so good because other communities have opened up. And so I'm grateful.
So often discussions around race and what people think of as social justice are branded as divisive. They cause disunity. They are relegated to the realm of, right and left and partisan. Can you just review for us some practice tips for communicating these tough concepts? What do you say to people who reject the opportunity to even discuss something like this? And they say it's partisan and all that. And I guess, and I know this is a hyper compound question. I'm really good for that. But is that why you are going down the path of Tisby Media so that you can show the story rather than tell it?
You got it. To the first part of your question, speak the truth in love and shake the dust from your sandals. From Ephesians, speaking the truth in love, right? And I
Mhm,
love it because there's a purpose attached to that to build the body up.
mhm,
Speaking the truth is meant to strengthen the church, not to divide the church. And the reality is, when we reject the prophets, when we reject the truth teller, that is what leads to division because you are maintaining a false peace. So we must speak the truth in love with the desire to strengthen the body. But if they will not receive you, Mark chapter 6, Jesus sends out the disciples two by two. It says, if they will not receive your message, shake the dust from your feet and move on to the next village. So that's where we also have to put the attention. People dwell on the shaking the dust part. Oh, I'm giving up on people. Oh, I'm being hopeless and
yeah.
cynical. No, 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 no. You are stewarding your time and your energy.
Mhm.
And also, we need to focus on that next part, go on to the next village. That means there are people elsewhere who need your message. They're not getting it while you're fooling around with folks who have already said they don't want it. So
Wow.
that's what I say. Speak the
Yeah.
truth in love and shake the dust from your sandals. And that's where Tisby Media does come in.
Mm,
We don't want to be muted or muzzled by any gatekeepers. We
mm.
want to be able to speak the truth as we see it and help people move from empathy to action.
Just the fact that you are on location so that people can see the the dilemma up close and see where people is, just the fact that you're looking at and experiencing something with real people would make this transformational. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
That was our whole goal. So I served as executive producer on this film, and we had a director. Her name is Lauren Vernay. And so as I was explaining the project to her, my number one priority was l- do everything you can to get out of the way
Mm-hmm.
and let the migrant story be at the forefront because I
Yeah,
knew just hearing from real people affected by these policies was going to be transformational.
yeah.
So, in a way, our job was easy because the stories were there. In a way, our job was very delicate because we had to make sure that we didn't put too much stuff into the film that it distracted you from the story of the migrants?
I hope that people, and you maybe you can tell me, we could still do screenings and get engaged. Is that still available?
Correct.
Yeah.
So we've pursued an innovative distribution model.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a theatrical streaming release, nor is it just posted on YouTube for people to stumble on. What we are encouraging people to do is host community screenings.
Mm-hmm.
We want you to watch this with other people. So these are Bible study groups, church congregations, immigration nonprofits, and you fill out a screening interest form. You tell us about your organization, your event, and then we communicate with you personally to help craft an experience. Because what we want to happen at the end of this film is not just that you feel sad. What happens at the end of this film is that you look at your neighbor and say, what are we going to do about it?
Tell me when this comes out in Message Magazine, um, we would like we're going to be right in the middle of the 250th anniversary of the founding of the United States of America. Just saying that comes out of my mouth. It's different from what I'm hearing from other people who are celebrating this as people of color, as a Black woman. I look at this different. As a Black woman of faith, I look at this different. They're discussing the founding fathers, the freedoms, and revival. Where do you come down on this celebration?
This is white Christian nationalism on steroids. And part of the ideology is to create a mythical past. So we are being increasingly inundated by revisionist, undisciplined, imaginary history. And the core of that history is that this was founded as a Christian nation.
Mm,
When the founders explicitly separated church and state. But now they're going back to say, oh no, it's been, practicing Christian principles from the beginning, which on its face is untrue because they were practicing race-based chattel slavery. They were practicing land theft. They were practicing genocide. And you're calling this a Christian nation. I say that is a violation of many commandments, but in particular, the commandment not to take the Lord's name in vain,
mm, mm.
because you are claiming unjust actions in the name of God. And that is a violation, that is a profaning of God's name.
What would you like to see happen right now for people? Practice something new, try something different, get in. I don't know. Where are you with that?
So, referring to the America 250 thing, take the Bible at its word when it says the truth will set you free.
Yeah.
Truth brings liberation, even and especially when it's painful truth, like the truth about the history of this nation. We have to trust God's word when it says that learning this truth, sharing this truth will actually lead to greater freedom. And the opposite would be believing lies and remaining in bondage. And who wants that? In terms of immigration, what I hope this film does is remind everyone of the humanity of migrants. These are not problems to solve, these are people to love.
Mm,
And if we have that mind about us, then we will have better policies that will keep our country safe,
mhm,
but also welcome the foreigner and the stranger as our native born, as it says in Leviticus.